Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Klein, co-founder and CEO, along with my husband and company visionary, Devin Klein.
And together, with our amazing team, we are going to help you push past your limits, not just physically in our gyms, but right here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on the Burn Bootcamp podcast.
Together, we will take on challenges and break through barriers to transform into the best possible version of ourselves. We are more than a gym. We are a community. Your community. Let's go, Burn Nation. All right. Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Morgan Klein, and I am so excited to introduce to you guys our next guest. Today's guest is a voice of hope for every parent who's ever felt overwhelmed, unheard, or helpless in the face of their child's health struggles. Dr. Anna Maria Temple is a board-certified pediatrician who walked away from the traditional system to fight for something deeper, true healing. After watching too many families get stuck in the cycle of symptoms and prescriptions, she made it her mission to help parents take back their power, using food as medicine, building immune strength naturally, and healing the root cause, not just the symptoms. With over 20 years of experience and a heart for educating and empowering, Dr. Temple has become a lifeline for families searching for a better way. Her passion is contagious, her knowledge is unmatched, and her message is clear. You don't have to settle for normal when it comes to your child's health. So this episode is going to be more than a conversation. It's a wake-up call. It's a dose of inspiration and a reminder that the body is designed to heal when we start to listen to it. So welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast, Dr. Temple.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. So listen, I'm going to just go right in with the hard-hitting question here and just to kick us off. But you don't trust traditional pediatrics, do you?
It's let me down with each one of my 3 children.
Okay, so let's get into that. You know, what was the moment that broke your trust?
Yeah, it's actually in 2007. My children at that time were on chronic medications, allergy medicines, asthma medicines, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, I just got tired of the recurrent symptoms and all these meds. My little one couldn't go out on an Easter egg hunt because his eyes would swell shut.
Mm-hmm.
His body would be covered in hives, and he would rip his skin off scratching on the ground while crying. And so, I took the 3-ring circus to the doctors one day, and I was like, what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
Why are my children on so many chronic medications? And they're like, oh, for the little one, he was on 5 allergy medicines at that time.
Wow.
They said there's no more meds. The only next option is allergy shots.
Okay.
He was 2 years old. For my daughter, they're like, oh, well, for her asthma is controlled with inhaled steroids, and her eczema is controlled with topical steroids, and her allergies are controlled with Zyrtec. And I mean, she will just eventually outgrow her recurrent ear infections. And her constipation is doing well on Miralax. By the time that we got to my middle one with a snot, like the kind of snot you never come out of the house these days.
Yeah.
By the time we got to him, his snot and his ADHD, I had stopped paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I walked out of that office unheard, dismissed, and alone. And I was in my practice for 5 years at that time.
Wow.
And I had no idea what to do. And I stepped outside of that office. And you know when the mama warrior takes over?
Yeah.
She wakes up and she's like, what?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Like, we're done.
Yeah,
I've had
we're
enough.
done. Yeah. She was like, what's up? Like, so the children's rest of their story is not chronic meds. The children's rest of the story is going to be how they're done with chronic meds, how they're going to heal from their chronic disease, and how they're going to become the example by which other families are going to heal their children. I don't know how we're going to do that, but that's really the goal. Whatever was happening in that room, that's not the goal.
Yeah.
This is a new goal.
Yeah.
And whatever, I went home, and a week later, I went to my kids' school, Beverly Woods Elementary. I'm gonna give them a little shout out. And they had a nutritionist come in. And I would go to all the school's functions because I'm supporting the school. So Tuesday morning, 7:30 in the morning, freezing my butt off in like a first grader's classroom where the fog lifted and I understood the root cause of my children's illnesses. All that the lady talked about was sugar. And I thought I was doing great. I'm a pediatrician. I was feeding them strawberries at lunch and broccoli at dinner. They were having fruits and vegetables. And not until she pulled out all her examples that I realized how much sugar I was feeding my children. So that night, I came home, 7:30 at night, my stilettos, from clinic, walked into the pantry, trash bag, and throw away the Lucky Charms, toaster strudels, cinnamon toast crunch, chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, juice boxes. You name a garbage, my children were eating it. Unfortunately, that's when I became an outcast in my family. My husband and I fought over food for the next 5 years. He's an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay.
My friends thought I lost my mind. My family was like, get her out of the will because she's completely nutso. And then my medical partners were like, where's the medical evidence? And I was like, you know, it's 2007. I was like, I don't know where the medical evidence is on this, but I can tell you, it can't be wrong to get rid of processed foods and bring in fruits and vegetables to these children. And over the next 5 years, because, you know, as mama warriors do, they don't care about the naysayers. You don't care about what people are saying. You just keep going. And then I kept going, and over the next 5 years, my children stopped needing medications. They were able, in 2016, we quit our jobs. We moved to New Zealand.
Yes, I read about that.
We had no doctors, no medications, no health insurance, and my children thrived. They climbed the highest mountains and bungee jumped off all the bridges. And that's when I realized this is what it looks like to come back from chronic disease and thrive. So when I came back to the States in late 2017, I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going back into traditional practice. We're going to do this differently. I want to teach families what I know. I want to show them what it's like to thrive. And so that's kind of, then I started figuring out how to build a practice and use a fax machine and a stapler.
Well, so, and you know, kind of going back to you were the crazy one in your family, holistic medicine is still taboo for many areas in the U.S., you know, or many families. And so there is this like perception that it's not medical based and it's not scientific based and it's hoo-ha and all of this stuff. And so how have you been able to kind of debunk that in your own practice or with just the people that you influence?
Well, you know, because my children, you know, again, my husband was like, this is complete BS, right? In my own house. But because I started seeing the effects of my children having good nutrition and how that changed their lifestyle, because I saw that, I was able to speak it differently to my patients. I prioritize what I was saying in clinic. Previously, I was prioritizing medications, and I started prioritizing food and nutrition and lifestyle. So some families, of course, were like, whatevs. And then I just gave them meds.
They were like, I came here for medication.
Correct. You did. I had a child for ADHD. They were coming in for a new diagnosis of ADHD. And I was doing a dietary history, which was new because, I mean, I was like really in depth. And tons of sugar, artificial food dyes, processed foods, et cetera. And I said to the parents, both parents, I said, I need you to change your food because before we do any medications, so we can see the effect of nutrition on her neurological status before we do meds. And the father said to me, I am 40 years old. I have the right to eat like this. I'm never going to change my diet. So what else do you have? And so that for that family, you know, I did the best I can. I'm not going to badger them, and we moved on. But a lot of other families were really open to what I had to say. And then they started asking different questions. And once they started asking different questions, I started looking into different things. And, you know, because when we moved to New Zealand in 2016, I didn't have my visa to work. My husband started right away. The kids were all in school. And so I had to wait for my visa. And while I was waiting for my visa, I was like, I discovered functional medicine. I was like, well, if I'm here, might as well learn about functional medicine. And then I'm like, well, if I'm learning about functional medicine, I love to teach. Let me teach on Instagram. It was like 200 people. And
but look at you now.
So I was like, hey guys, I found out that vitamin D and eczema are connected, and here's how. And then I would spend hours making these, well, I call them 1-minute pediatrics, which, by the way, I would like to have Instagram pay me because I was the first reel that ever was. So in 2016, I was doing 1-minute pediatric videos of teaching people what I would learn about functional medicine. And because I had the time, I was able to uncover all this science, all this data, because it wasn't that it wasn't there. I was asking the wrong questions.
Got it. So, you know, for people listening, and it's at Burn Boot Camp, we have mostly women and a lot of moms here. And so take yourself back to even when your kids were smaller and you were spending all those, you know, times in the doctor's office. Finding the root takes time. And a lot of times we can lose our patience, right? Because our kids are suffering and we just want a solution for them. So how do you balance that with parents that are coming in or parents that you're, talking to of, hey, like, just trust me, you gotta be patient because we got to get to the root of this versus the Band-Aid, the prescription, just kind of the common thing that they're used to seeing and hearing.
Well, when I was in my practice before I went to New Zealand, I would do exactly what you just said. The people were like, well, I waited for 45 minutes in the waiting room. I've had this headache for 6 years. I'm expecting quick results.
Yeah.
So I would talk about the ingredients in the drinks. I would talk about turning off Netflix. I would talk about sleeping or going outside. But they would just kind of look at me like, where's the med? And I would give them a medication.
Yeah.
When I moved to New Zealand, there's no malpractice. And I had hour appointments. And so I walked in and I was like, let's put my big girl pants on. And I walked in and they were like, I have chronic headaches for 6 months. And I was like, there's no medicines for this. And I'm like, and they looked at me, they're like, really? And I was like, yeah, there's no medicines. I mean, there's like a chemical you can take, but then that's going to have side effects. But really what we need to do is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And what I realized is how I say it. When I said nutrition or lifestyle and gave them a medicine, 0 people made changes because they were like, oh, I'm holistic. And no, they didn't. They just took medicines. When I give them no other choice, they made changes because they're like, well, I'm never going to eat breakfast and I'm never going to turn my Netflix off. And I'm like, well, that's cool because when your pain gets bad enough, you will. Oh, and bonus, I am the only specialist in that you can see because there's no, like I was a specialist for neurology.
You had some leverage.
I was it. I'm like, you waited to see me 6 months. You're going to have to wait a long time if you don't change your habits.
Yeah.
And they changed. 90% of my people changed and they saw benefits. And once they started seeing benefits, they were like, wait, this is not voodoo. This is amazing. What else do we do?
And so I know it can be overwhelming, right? All these changes. We've talked specifically a little bit about food right now. But tell us a little bit about your book because I know you wrote a book for parents to use to just small habits over time, start looking at labels. Like, tell us about your pillars a little bit, and then the book too, just so we can introduce that to our audience.
Well, as a busy mom, I had 3 kids. My husband was working a full-time job. I'm working a million hours, doing all this stuff. I was like, there's no way you can make all these changes in one day. Not possible. We think we can do it. No, we can't because first of all, the human body doesn't want you to do all these changes at the same time.
Sure.
The body gets sick. And so I was like, you know what? I had written this blog. I had this blog thing going. And I had written my journey. And I was like, year 1, buy Vitamix. Year 2, make smoothies. And then I was like, you know what? These are doable. Like everyone could purchase a better blender or purchase a blender if you don't have one. You can go, okay, before a snack, I'm going to add a fruit or a vegetable. Okay, I can do that. That's easy. You can go, all right, my kids are not falling asleep at night, so nutrition is pillar 1, sleep is another pillar. Okay, I could remove their phones from my teenagers' bedrooms. I mean, that sounds easy, but it's simple. It's just not easy.
Yeah.
But it's one thing.
Yeah.
Right? I can buy an alarm clock. It's one thing. For going outside, another pillar. Okay, well, for every minute that they play outside, then I'm going to give them 1 minute of screen time, and then there's no screen time if they don't play outside. Okay, that's a small thing that maybe you tackle screens because nutrition is too difficult.
Yeah.
And then another pillar is environment.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we're going to change the toothpaste.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people when they go to environment, they're like, oh, but I have to change the detergent and the soap and the toothpaste and the cleaner and the whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how about we just go with one thing?
Yeah. Yeah. my recommendation always is when you're replacing something in your house, try to just replace it with that healthier version of it, and then you're not feeling overwhelmed all at once. It's, the small habits. So, all right. So I'm going to jump a little bit. I watched an Instagram video of you and your son. You were in the car and you were quizzing him. And you were quizzing him on, associating different things to a word that he thought of. And I thought it was interesting because, and I'll let you definitely talk about the point, but none of the food stuff was fun. It was yummy. It was good. It was delicious. But none of the bad foods that you called out were fun. And I think that is one barrier that parents have of changing their nutrition or changing their kids' nutrition because they want the ice cream and the treats and they don't want to take the little Debbie's away or whatever it looks like, but it's full of things that aren't good for you. but you're worried that they're not going to have fun, like a fun childhood. So tell us a little bit about that theory and what you did with your son.
Well, I hear that all the time. They're like, they're not going to have fun. And I'm like, when did we think that food is fun? And I was like, wait, I've never described food as fun, right?
Yeah.
And so in the video, I told Evan, he was driving, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna play this game. I'm not telling you what to say because I need it to be raw footage, spontaneous. And so I would just name a food, and then I would name an activity, and I would name a food and activity. And he was like, delicious, and the activity would be fun, and then it would be amazing, so yummy. Sorry, Mom, that is yummy. And I'm like, I understand, Doritos are yummy. I'm not saying they're not.
Yeah.
And then trampoline park, and he's like, fun. And my whole point being that it is a story parents tell themselves that if the children don't have Skittles and food coloring, they're not going to have a fun childhood.
Yeah.
That's just a story we are telling ourselves. Because I'm always like, so you're saying that people in Africa don't have fun.
Yeah.
If you're saying that people in the Amazon don't have fun because they don't have Skittles. That's what we're saying. Because I lived in New Zealand when that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it looked like the kids had a lot of fun. Also, children's love language is not food. Children's love language is quality time.
Yeah.
So if you want your children to have a fun childhood, spend time with them.
Yeah.
Do fun activities. They don't have to cost a lot of money. They just want you to hang out with them. They want you to play cars on the carpet.
Yeah.
Go to a park that is free.
Yeah.
Go for a walk. Go find worm. One activity we did one time, it had rained, and my kids were being annoying inside. And I'm like, that's it, we're going outside. And we are going to pick worms. You know, like the worms that come out after the rain and then they die on the sidewalk? Everyone had a bucket, and we, with our bare hands, we picked up worms off the sidewalk. They thought it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And again, when they look, and I kind of ask them now, they're 23, 21, and 18. And I'll do spontaneous things on Insta. I'm like, tell me about your childhood. What was fun about your childhood? They're like, when we did this, when we went there, nobody goes, you know what, if I had more Chick-fil-A, it would have been more fun.
Yeah.
If you would have let me go to McDonald's, I would have had a fun childhood. But I didn't, so now I'm a miserable adult. Like, it's not.
I think it's a tough balance. I mentioned to you before this podcast, I have a 9-year-old daughter and then 2 boys, 7 and 5. And we just had an incident with my middle son. And I caught him changing his food stuff, like we make their lunches. They don't get hot lunch, and the school does not provide that lunch because it's not healthy. It's not up to my standards. So we pack them lunch, and I caught him the other night swapping things out. And he wasn't even swapping it out with bad food because we don't typically keep bad food in our house. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I keep getting made fun of because my lunch is the healthiest. And I said, okay. Well, what are some other kids having? And, of course, Doritos. And he starts naming all the stuff. And it made me, of course, Mama Bear came out, and I was mad about it. I'm like, who's saying this? But I was like, you know what? This isn't the norm yet. This isn't the norm for schools to be serving healthy foods and for, foods to be safe there for us without all of this junk that we're going to talk a little bit about next. But, the balance is tough as a parent. Even baseball snacks, parents bring Gatorade. And it's so hard for me to say no, right? And I have to remember, like, okay, well, what is the balance here? What is the balance of them having that moment and feeling like they're part of the team versus being like, no, these are your separate snacks? So how did you navigate that? Because you probably had it even worse. We've made some progress, but not as much as probably when you were pioneering this.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it so sad that the abnormal is what's normal? Isn't it sad that we teach our children to make fun of other people who eat vegetables? I get made fun. I went out, a pediatrician friend and I went out, and I ordered salad and chicken because I enjoy eating salad and chicken, and I have a gluten sensitivity, and I don't make a big deal about it. I don't talk about it. So I order things that are not breaded, and when people order appetizers that are breaded, I don't eat it. And it was like, why do you have to be so good? Why are you trying to be so healthy? Why can't you just eat? And I'm like, I have a gluten sensitivity, so now I'm like that person. And then, I'm like, but I just really want vegetables. I had to explain myself to another doctor. So if another doctor is making fun of me that when I'm going out with the girls, I'm eating vegetables because I enjoy eating vegetables. I've trained my body to enjoy vegetables. The poor children. The poor children, right? Yeah. And so my children got made fun of course. It was like the same thing. And I was like, so for my kids, I was like, okay, well, how I empowered them to stand up for their choices and
Yeah.
for their food. I'm like, how do you feel about food? They're like, it's fine. It's like, well, how do I react to when somebody's talking about it? They're like, you have your lunch, I have my lunch. I'm not making fun of your lunch. Don't make fun of my lunch. So we worked
Yeah.
on some ways. I did not replace their lunch to look like the other
Yeah.
kids' lunches, because
We
that's
don't
not the
waver.
point. Right.
Yeah.
That was not the point. I'm like, I'm not giving you a healthy alternative to look like Doritos. You're not eating Doritos. You don't need a chip at
Yeah.
lunch.
Yeah.
I taught them on how to stand up and politely and nicely talk about the selection that they have in their food. When they would go to birthday parties, I would feed them before a birthday party, just kind of like, oh, let's not be hungry kind of thing, because I'd fill their bellies with good stuff. And when they went to the birthday party, I didn't say a word.
Yeah.
I did not bring extra stuff. I didn't bring different things. And I knew that they would eat less of what they would be eating because they were full. I did the same thing on Halloween.
Yeah.
Same thing whenever
And so you've taught your kids how to make the right choices too, it sounds like, over time.
Right.
You haven't mandated or forced, but the choices that they get to make, and now as adults, that's ingrained in them.
Correct. And because that's what people say, like, oh, they're going to have an issue and then they're going to rebel. I'm like, you could look at my daughter's TikTok, because she's now becoming a TikTok influencer, and you can see her food. It's not me, and the way she's cooking, meal prepping. My son, who's graduating college in 2 days, I call him for recipes.
Yeah.
Because he is cooking at home. He's learned, was it a bumpy journey for him in college? It was. But you know what he learned? His skin looks amazing when he cooks at home.
Yeah.
But it had natural consequences. And when we went to the sports field, when they would get the Gatorade and the stuff, I'm like, how about do you really need the whole, don't you just drink water? Like, why don't you have like 4 sips or whatever, like have a big gulp,
Yeah.
and we're going to throw the rest away.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a no. It was like, well, let's have some so we don't die of curiosity.
Right.
Because it's kind of like whenever you get a cake at a restaurant, it's always the first 2 bites. And after that, you're eating it only because it's a sunk cost fallacy. You're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to eat it because I'm paying
Because
for
I
it.
have it.
Good, right, and
Yeah.
I have it.
Yeah.
But if we really think about it, it's the first 2 bites that give you that high, and then the rest you're like, meh.
Yeah.
So the same thing, I was like, fine. So then have your 2 sips of Gatorade and have your 2 Doritos, and
Yeah.
then we're going to throw
And
it
then
in
we're
the
moving
trash.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I like that approach. So let's talk about what's actually in the food, right, that's harming us, right? We talk a lot about dyes, artificial sweeteners. So if you could just, what is it about the food and the processed food that we need to get out of our food system?
How long do we have? But you know what? But we're the cusp of a huge change. So artificial food dyes have been the bane of my existence. And I have to give the food industry some kudos, because I've been doing videos, going to the local grocery store and Target and Walmart, and I'm like, this has food dye. And so the videos have gotten harder and harder to make. I have to look harder and harder for food dyes.
Okay.
So I do have to give some kudos.
Yeah.
I was like, all right. And then, we had the big FDA announcement a week and a half ago. And 2 days ago, Pepsi announced that they're removing food dyes by the end of 2025 in popular foods.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah. So artificial food dyes have been shown in multiple studies, including meta-analyses, blah, blah. That means that there was a study where they reviewed all the different studies to see if there was any validity to it. And they found that there's a population of children who are sensitive to food dyes and have adverse neurological issues. And then we have data that shows that it interferes with eczema, that it makes your asthma worse, it makes allergies worse, aside from just neurological stuff. So then we have food additives, preservatives like BHT, TBHQ, which have been shown to cause cancer. We have sodium benzoate. We have hydrogenated vegetable oils, which, by the way, they were made illegal like way back in 2018, but the companies have figured out how to get away with it just a little bit. What is a popular food? Peanut butter. And anything in it that is partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated, those are trans fats that the FDA has deemed that need to be out of our food system. Oh, but only, it's okay if there's just like a little bit.
Right.
And I'm always like, wait a minute, if there's just a little arsenic in our food, is that okay? We just have a little arsenic. Arsenic doesn't kill you immediately. It's just a little bit, tiny little bit.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. And one of the things people say, again, pediatricians have said to me in the past, well, the kids are fine. Having Lucky Charms sometimes, or even if they have it on the regular, it's not a big deal because they're healthy. And I'm like, again, back to the arsenic. A little bit of arsenic is going to kill you over a long time. When cigarettes were an issue, right? If you smoke 10 cigarettes a day, are you going to die that day? No. Do you get lung cancer that day? No. But you smoke 10 pack years, which is a whole pack for every day for 10 years, you are much higher risk of developing all sorts of cancer. It doesn't happen in one day. Yeah. So the same thing with these food additives that do not need to be in our food, and specifically artificial food dyes. We know they don't need to be there. They're there simply for marketing. Mm-hmm. And who are they marketing to? Children. Mm-hmm. I lived in New Zealand where they have the same brands. They don't have the artificial food dyes allowed. And if a company puts red 40 in something, there's a giant warning label, like massive warning label, saying this has been associated with neurological adverse outcomes and ADHD. So
that company's probably not selling much if it has that label on it.
Exactly.
So they've learned how to change the ingredients.
Exactly. And same like cigarettes. Like now on a cigarette pack, you get the warning label. Mm-hmm. And so other companies, so that's what was really frustrating. I lived in another country for a year and a half without any of these food additives. The food tasted exactly the same. Yeah. My children were as happy, if not happier, than they're in the United States. And yet in the U.S., we put so many excuses about these things that, have shown. And, and one of my favorite things is like, well, we need more studies and we need more data. And I'm like, how many more children have to suffer before we acknowledge that these ingredients that have been allowed by the FDA, by the GRAS, which is generally regarded as safe. So some dude or lady in an office one day said, this is fine. This is literally how it came. Oh, that ingredient is fine. It got put in the food. No data, no research whatsoever. And now we're looking at our children. And one of the things that I want to let everybody know, our children are sicker than ever been before. Ever before. 14 years ago, our children, rates of chronic disease were 1 in 20. As of 2024, it's 1 in 2. 50% of our children have a chronic disease. By next year, 100% of our children are predicted to have a chronic disease if we keep on this trajectory. And that's not okay. And people are like, well, my kids are not, come there all the time. I need a pediatrician. My children are not that sick. But they go to a dermatologist, a pulmonologist, a neurologist, like immunologist, all these things, or they're taking tons of over-the-counter medications. If you're taking Zyrtec, Prevacid, Zantac, Motrin, Tylenol, Benadryl on a regular basis, you have a chronic condition.
Yeah. So do you have any concerns? Because I am personally excited about the food bans and what the FDA has done and the progress you said that the food industry has made. Do you have any concerns that they're going to find loopholes?
Oh, yeah. I don't trust anybody. The reason I fly to Washington, D.C. and cancel my clinic and listen to, Dr. McCary do his announcement and see what RFK is up to, because I don't trust anyone and I want to be there in person to see what they're saying and what we're going to do about it. So can the food industry find loopholes? Absolutely. But I'll tell you, for the first time ever, there's a physician heading the FDA that was not in politics before. He was all about food. He's already written the books. He's already been talking about this way before he was put as the head of the FDA. And I followed him for a long time. And I was like, love this guy. Who's this guy? So I know that he's speaking the same language that I am and the tribe is. And he is going to be on the lookout. He doesn't trust the food companies either, and he's going to be on the lookout. And they've already put parameters in place on what's going to happen for those who will try to do lawsuits or try to find the loopholes.
So the win for the food companies is potentially cheaper product, better margins, and they can have their products be more colorful for kids to be attracted to. What are they going to sue for? They're going to sue because they're not making as much money?
Well, I guess. Well, you know what? Because they'll be like, oh, the Trix is not as colorful, so the children
aren't buying it.
Correct.
Or something.
I mean, let's just kind of say we shouldn't be eating Trix anyway, but whatever. They're going to be. But when they looked at the data for the money, it's not going to be an increase in price.
Yeah.
So that's a story that everyone.
I thought. I thought it was, they're just money hungry.
They are money hungry because more colorful sells more stuff.
Okay, that makes
Color
sense.
sells.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at packaging in a store, the things that are geared towards kids are colorful. They have cartoons, and the earthy stuff, the crunchy stuff, is more brown. It's more laid back. Because color, they're trying to get the children's attention. They're trying to get the children to annoy their parents because they've learned that parents are giving into their children because we've moved into a child-led parenting era where the parents are like, oh, well, they like it. And, in clinic I go, well, you know what I'd like right now? A martini. And I like a vodka. But you know what? It's not a good idea for me to drink a martini right now as I'm in the office. So it's the same thing. Like, that's not a good idea. And Doritos, and I'm like, everyone, you always go to alcohol. I'm like, good. I'm making a point. Because you know what a 16-year-old wants to do? Smoke weed. And we're going to be like, oh, you can't smoke weed. Oh, it's okay. Just drink the Coke and just drink and eat all the food coloring, which is more chemically poisonous than smoke. I'm not saying smoking weed's good. I'm saying disclaimer, but I'm saying that we make these we
make these exceptions for food.
Thank you. Yes.
And that kind of leads me to my next thought and question. And we certainly aren't going to get political on here, but it does have me wondering why this creates such a divide. I see people like yourself that are fighting for children and that are fighting for these ingredients to be removed from, brands and products. But then I see this other conversation over here that's like not excited about it. And it blows my mind, truly. And it just makes me wonder, why would it be bad to remove it, right? Like, what do we have to lose if we remove food dyes as consumers?
I am the same way. And it's, we have the Western medical side, the traditional team, traditional medicine is not yet on board. Yeah. So that's number one.
Because there's not enough studies in their mind?
Because we were not taught this in med school.
Okay.
And then when you're not taught this in med school and somebody comes to you, like me, and says, no, there's studies, it's almost like I'm offending that they don't know what they're talking about. That's not what I'm saying. It's how we interpret the information. And, people have gone to have a great education, and it's like, well, I went to Stanford, so if this was, if you could treat eczema with nutritional changes and supplementation, I would have learned it in Stanford.
Yeah.
So if I didn't learn it, then it's got to be a bunch of BS. Also, in the traditional model, I used to see patients every 10 minutes. I would see 28 patients a day. So if somebody came in and was like, oh, hey, can you tell me more about what is the side effect of food dyes or, hydrogenated vegetable or whatever, my head would want to explode, because I knew that after my 28 patients, I would have 3 hours of charting. I have to go home. I have to feed dinner. I have to cook from scratch. I have to deal with my husband who's crabby from his job, and so you're like, the last thing you want to do is research one more thing. You're like, surely if this was a thing, I would know it. So it was very easy to just kind of say there's not enough evidence. And again, is how we ask the questions. One of the things people don't understand when you research on Google or PubMed, whatever, these are already the algorithm is created for you to find what your bias is, because the computers are made to reinforce your bias. Yeah. And as I said before, it wasn't until I asked different questions that I got the answer. I was like, oh my God, there's the data. I had to uncover it. Simple example is, root causes of eczema. And you'll get fragrances, allergies, dog, genetics, right? That's it. And then
food.
You don't get food. But if you go, is there any studies to show that there's atopic dermatitis and food sensitivities? Boom. Any link between eczema and Zantac or acid blockers? Boom.
Yeah. It's like your inputs have to be
correct,
unbiased, or you've got to ask the right questions.
You got to ask the right questions. Yeah. So we have that from the medical team. And then again, it's changing. More people are becoming more open-minded, and I know it always sounds like I'm bashing, but I'm like that. I get criticized from the medical side, from the Western traditional folks. So I'm like, sorry. And then the other side is, I think it's just a tantrum. I literally think in the politic world, it's like, well, the other side said this, so we are 2-year-olds, and we're just going to be ornery about it because we didn't say it, or because they're saying it, because there's no actual. One of the things in the North Carolina, because we're trying to get artificial food dyes banned in North Carolina, and I met with the legislators. I'm not in politics. I'm there just to get the food dyes out. And one of the counters was, oh, well, people are going to go across state lines to get Skittles. And then the small businesses in North Carolina are going to lose money because all these people are going to South Carolina to get the more colorful Skittles. And I'm like, you guys forget one thing. We humans are lazy. There's no chance people are driving. Now, if it's going to be 3 times more expensive for the Skittles in the North Carolina, okay, I could see that. But that's not what's going to happen. And I'm like, again, a story we're telling that is not based on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we talk about food dyes, and I definitely want to stay on that track. But as I'm thinking about this, I just want to note that my daughter loves Sephora right now, and you mentioned fragrance, which triggered me, because that is also a battle. And I would imagine a lot of people listening, if if your daughters love Sephora, because that is like all they want to do right now, it's so hard to go in there and prevent her from buying ingredients, products that have ingredients in it that I know are not good for her. She's 9. So I know a lot of this stuff is going to disrupt her endocrine system, and like that has so many other effects. Does that have a link to eczema and allergies and asthma?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm also going to give Sephora some kudos. They have brought in a lot more clean brands.
I agree.
Yeah.
So she is able to buy some stuff from
stuff
there.
because I looked, because I go in like guns a-blazing, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, all right, I'll take it down a notch. But one of the things for a 9-year-old, what I do is I teach them how to use the Think Dirty app. So for my daughter, I was like, that's cool. You want to buy stuff? I'm with you. Do you want fragrance or whatever you want? She was allowed to have a little blush, neutral eyeshadow, like in 5th grade.
Yeah.
But what we did was like, but we're gonna go and look on these apps or EWG, whichever is your preference. And then I was like, so we're gonna make sure those are not the ingredients in there, and then you can go get the stuff. So it wasn't a no. It was like, but how do we purchase it?
Yeah.
The same thing when we went to the store to get food or to get a deodorant or to get toothpaste. We're like, it's not, because they want to feel like they want to be grown up, and and so then we teach them. But I'll tell you, the most important lesson is, what are we using? What are we eating? How are we sleeping? Are we going outside? What is our screen time use? And what products are we putting on our body? Because children don't listen to what we say, but they copy everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there as much pressure being put on the cosmetic companies as there is the food industry, or has that not caught up yet?
Not really.
Yeah.
I've just seen a lot of brands doing it all on their own, and then people are just voting with their money and choosing. People, especially to puberty, because puberty has now started earlier and earlier, and mamas are very concerned. That is a pain point. And so when it comes to puberty and earlier puberty and girls getting boobs earlier and appear promiscuous, but it's just because you get boobs, you're not promiscuous. But again, that's the story that appears in our head. Their mamas are paying more attention to the cosmetics. I don't have as much of an issue with the cosmetic side as much as the food side.
Okay. That has a more profound impact on things like that.
It's just the story, because they're like, okay, well, I understand about endocrine disruptors, and I know they associate makeup with puberty. They're not associating food with puberty necessarily.
Yeah. Does milk have anything to do with that, and dairy?
So dairy has several things to do with it. So conventional dairy, and by the way, if anyone has a partner that does not believe in any of this, kind of like my husband was, a podcast listener and documentaries. So Food Inc. was a great one when we were starting to change how we're purchasing milk and meat.
I remember that one.
It was great. It's a very straightforward. And the point is that in conventionally grown meat, they live in pens, they stay in their feces, they eat corn. And because the cows live in feces, they get infections, so then they get a lot of antibiotics. So we get 60 to 80% of our antibiotic exposure actually comes from meat, not from your doctor's office. And when we eat a lot of food products that have antibiotics, that alters our gut microbiome. When the gut microbiome is altered, that actually influences our hormones and how the hormones get expressed. And people may be like, that's weird. Okay, well, let's bring it back for a second. So when the National Institute of Health, the NIH, looked at identifying the Human Genome Project, they found 40,000 genes that are like for your eye color, do you have dementia, deafness, whatever. But they found 3.3 trillion bacteria genes in our gut.
Wow.
And they're like, hold up. And fun fact, 3 to 4 pounds of our adult weight is only bacteria weight. What? For every 1 human cell, we're 10 bacteria cells. So when we're eating, the bacteria in our gut they interplay, they work with our genetics, they work with our bodies, and the bacteria help determine our hormone levels. Our bacteria help determine if we're going to have type 2 diabetes, if we're going to have premenopause, perimenopause, early menopause, early puberty, whatever. And so by eating food that has a lot of antibiotics, well, boom, now we are killing a lot of the microbiome that is there to protect us, and it gets replaced with bacteria that doesn't protect us. Then we have hormones that are coming in the milk. And then we have, a lot of people are like, oh, we need to eat more liquid calories. And the liquid calories help stir up insulin growth factors, and those actually, it's not always great to grow because other things grow, like tumors. So some milk is fine. I'm not saying dairy's horrible. If you get it, I love minimally pasteurized. There's some companies that do a really great job. And then you don't eat every day. That's an American thing. In the United States, we're the only country we're like, oh, well, you don't drinking milk, you don't get enough calcium. I'm like, in Europe, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
And I know this because my kids used to drink 5 gallons of milk a week.
Wow.
5 gallons. And when we would go to Europe, my kids would be at the table asking for milk in the restaurants, and everyone in Europe was like, that is so bizarre.
Like milk for dinner, you know?
Correct, like milk for dinner, and they would have milk with meals. They didn't drink water, they drank milk.
Yeah.
But in the U.S., we're the only country that is so hyper-focused on calcium. Why is that? From the dairy industry. We're the only country that on the plate.gov has dairy as its own food group.
Yeah, we're the only country.
Only
Wow.
country. The rest of the world has dairy with proteins.
Oh, okay. Man, I feel like I need to clean up my diet too. Here talking, no, it's pretty good. But okay, so I know I kind of went off on a tangent there with other things. Let's bring it back to food dye. So if we're listening to this and we're like, okay, this was my wake up call. I need to start reading labels. I need to start looking at the food that I'm consuming, that my children are consuming. What are they looking for?
Simple thing. If you can't read it, don't eat it.
Okay.
If you have to look something up, like, oh, I wonder what monosodium glutamate is. If you're Googling that, you're putting that product back. So if you can't read it, don't eat it.
Okay.
As a general rule of thumb, of course we're going to do some packaged foods. Life is life, right? We're busy. If general rule, if it has more than 5 ingredients, is often filled with things, additives that are not going to be our favorite, because they list, like the top 5 are usually real food a lot of time, and then it gets into the chemicals and the preservatives and the artificial vitamins that they put in there. So 5 or less ingredients in a bag. If you can't read it, don't eat it.
Okay.
Then if you see anything that's red 40 with a number, anything with a number.
Yeah, any color associated with a number.
Anything with a number, we're going to put it back. And just start with that. And really, when I first started this whole journey, I did not remove the Cheetos and the Doritos immediately. That's what makes for a really good intro story. But really what happened was I was like, I'm a yes household because I'm not going to create an issue. And what I was saying at the top of the episode was, for the snacks, they could have the Cheetos, but they would have to have a fruit or a vegetable. So I was like, let's fill our bellies with good stuff from the ground,
right.
And then we will earn the right from something packaged. And then once we got that going, then I was like, all right, now I'm going to take the Cheez-Its and replace them with Cheez-Its that actually have real food.
Yeah.
And then, so I went one thing at a time, a lot of Jedi mind tricks. We're going to do a taste test. Let's see which one do we like. Let's close our eyes. And I made it fun and engaging. Again, a lot of quality time. And we made games, so it wasn't like, you will eat like this and you're gonna die and sugar's bad for you and everything's horrible. I did not approach it that way. I was just like, we're just gonna do a little teaching point, very gentle, changes stuff. And that's why my children at the age in their 20s are not rebelling, and they're not eating processed foods on their own dime.
Yeah, because you also taught them, you empowered them, which I think is so important. And I think for anyone that's like just afraid to make that switch or upset people, it's worth it. What do you have to lose? You can always go back to eating the Doritos, but if you do this and you start to feel better and your kids start to feel better and they get off medication, like, isn't that the goal, right? Living life like that.
Correct. I'm like, what is it? All the time I'm like, what are we letting go of? What are we letting? I'm like, I would rather let go of chronic disease and medications and not eat whatever.
Yeah, and supporting like smaller brands, I know that's something that I've done a lot. And then I will say, you see like those bigger brands buy the little brands that like came out with the clean food, and you always fear like, are they going to change up the formula? Are they going to start putting a bunch of crap in there just to make more money? And I think that's a real fear that, I have for even the bands that are coming. It's like the big guys eat up the small guys, and then where does our food look like? And that's why we need to rely on the government to help protect us and these organizations.
But I'll tell you that I got to give a shout out to the mamas, because the mamas are coming in hot. And a lot of mamas have been talking about this for a long time. A lot of mamas, as I said, the tides are changing, and a lot of mamas have said it, and now they like, oh wait, the politicians are listening, and that just fueled the fire. And now they're grabbing more people from their tribe. The tribe is just getting bigger, and I'm really not worried. I had a recent press interview, and they're like, what do you think? It's moms, whatever you want to call it. I'm like, all I can tell you is the mama warriors felt heard, and Once
Yeah.
a mama warrior feels heard, she's bringing in the tribe,
Yeah.
and it's game on.
Yeah, and when you can come together and we can have a common goal, and that's why I just think, why is there divide over conversations like this? And if your kids are healthy and you feel like you're healthy and you're able to eat those foods, consider yourself lucky. But because that's not the case for other families and other children, like yours. And so we need to also fight for that as well. Maybe I'm not experiencing allergies and asthma and eczema with my 3 kids, but I do know kids that I love very much. And so we need it for all of our next generation.
But we're not just, to add to that, we're not just working on the today. Raising kids is a long play.
Yeah.
It's not like 18 and we're done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, chronic disease of adulthood begins in childhood. So we are trying to, if your children are not sick right now, amazing.
Yeah.
Our goal is that they're never sick. My goal is to put the cancer industry out of business. I want to put pulmonologists out of business. I want, and by the way, the cancer docs always laugh, like a sarcastic laugh when I say that. They're like, it's all genetic. I'm like, oh my God. So we want to raise the children, because there was studies done in Japan and Korea on 10-year-old children who died in car accidents, and they did autopsy reports. And what they found on autopsy, they already saw coronary artery plaques, which is the beginning of heart disease, as early as 10. And research, when I was in New Zealand in the neonatal intensive care unit, they were doing autopsies on newborns that passed away. Coronary artery plaques were already developing in newborns.
So that's coming from what the mother's
Is eating, correct. So it is a long play.
Wow.
We're expected, our life expectancy has shortened. I believe we just plateaued, but instead of going up, our life expectancy has declined.
Yeah.
And so we are expecting that our children live 70 to 80 years.
Yeah.
Well, that begins now. It's not like, okay, eat garbage now, and then at 40, I hope you figure it out and get it together.
Yeah. No, that was just like even a bigger aha for me. It's like, we don't just have to worry about our kids till they're 18. We're setting up their foundation to be healthy when they're a parent, and then when they're a grandparent. And so I hope that woke some other people up here on that podcast, is just another reminder why what we put in our body is so important, and how we fuel our children.
And I want to say, because I'm so glad you said that. So another thing you guys can look up is called Epigenetics. We have the power to turn our genes off or on. So we're born with whatever DNA. Let's just say eczema. So I have eczema genetics on. Well, by the choices that you make in your lifestyle, from stress to sleep to food to environmental stuff, you can turn those eczema genes off and not pass them on to your children.
Oh, wow.
So it's not, because it's generational. And a lot of times we're like, no, I just have genes and that's what I have to live. No. You have the power to change your life, to turn your genes off and not pass them on to the next generation, which is a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And the look up epigenetic study, agouti mice.
Well, we can link it too in the show notes, so we'll definitely find that. All right, so as we wrap up, anything else that you want to say, or just maybe one big takeaway that you want our listeners to have?
Well, we are at Burn Boot Camp, so I do want to talk about kids playing outside more.
Okay, let's do that.
Because we've become a sedentary society. Well, you know better than I do.
Yeah.
And we have, since COVID, it's become 1,000 times worse. And sitting around is melting our children's brains. It's deteriorating their bodies. And it's free. To play outside is free. And a lot of parents, again, insert many excuses. They're like, oh, okay, child trafficking, that's why they can't play outside. I'm like, that is not how that works. They're like, my child are going to get abducted from my yard. I'm like, also, that's not how that works. It's raining outside. It's cold outside. First of all, we live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Can we just say that for a second? Put some clothes on and go outside.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan, so this is never cold.
Correct, right. This is like toast. Are you a Lions fan?
I'm not like diehard, but I did go to their game, their playoff game.
Did you?
last.
Did you?
Yeah.
And you have blue colors.
Yeah.
Sidebar, everyone.
Yeah.
Lions fan. My husband's from Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah,
So,
I'm from the other side. They were just really bad growing up. So
They were horrible.
They really have been horrible for like 30 years, but they're finally getting better. So now I'm a fan.
Yeah, that's funny. So anyway, so playing outside, physical activity. I mean, you're trying to do a kids burn boot camp.
Yep.
You're trying to get parents to, because I have a lot of parents that exercise and their kids are couch potatoes, but they like the iPad. Again, I like a vodka. We're not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
I'd rather sit and watch Netflix than work my booty off and try to go to Raleigh and change the food industry. It's so much easier for me to watch a Netflix series, right? but we need to get our children moving. It has become toxic, the amount of sitting around and the amount of screens that are just polluting our children's bodies and brains.
Yeah. And not to mention the content that they are consuming when they're on those screens has gotten. I'm more worried about sex trafficking on like the screen.
Well, that's
like
what happens.
Correct. That stuff than I am going outside.
Isn't it ironic? People
Yeah.
are like, I don't want to go outside because of sex trafficking, but they'll stay inside on screens. I'm like, but that's
Yeah.
actually where it's happening.
Like the kids are getting DM'd from people
Yes.
that are going to go find out where they're at. That concerns me more. And I think, gosh, that's a whole nother podcast
Correct,
topic.
but that's right. Well, we're thinking we're protecting them from
Yeah.
something, and we're actually pushing them right
Yeah.
into it. And by the way,
Yeah.
my daughter on the next episode, we'll talk about when my daughter was approached about a sex trafficker trying to get her. But
it is
being
my
out,
biggest fear as a mom, but
it's
especially
real.
Charlotte. I know Charlotte is like one of the hubs of it. So,
it's a real thing, and they don't know, and they have no idea. My daughter was oblivious to the whole thing until it came to our attention. Yeah. Super
Okay.
scary. Okay, but my one takeaway is when you change your mind and you start believing that there's a different way of doing stuff, no one will stand in your way. But it has to begin with the belief that there's a better way. And when that belief begins, you're going to begin with one small change, your goal being better today than you were yesterday.
Yeah. Amen. And there's so many great resources out there if you are starting this journey to, healthier you, healthier kids, including your Instagram. So share with the audience where they can find you.
So generally I'm shopping at Target, Costco, and Walmart to show you, because it's confusing, and like all these ingredients, I show you what to buy and what not to buy. And that's on my Instagram at DRANA Maria Temple. Same thing on TikTok, because, why only stick on one platform where you can complicate your life?
Yeah.
On multiple.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening today. As a mom, as both of us being moms, as you can hear, we are powerful and passionate when we all come together. And so let's continue to support each other in making changes for our lifestyle, for our next generation's lifestyle, and so much more to come. So thank you guys for listening. And you know how we end all of our camps? 2 claps on 2?
Okay.
1, 2? Okay, we're going to do that on the podcast. All right, here we go. 2 claps on 2. 1, 2. Thanks, guys.